Hey there, I hope you're well. It's MWM here, and I know it probably seems a wee bit strange. First of all, I was speaking about Buddhism, and now I'm talking about Alice in Wonderland. Well, I plan to do a bit of both on the channel here and probably take turnabout on the video subjects, and seeing how I've become mad for books recently, I've been going back to read some classics and have just finished Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So here's my first thoughts, and we'll talk about the potentially hidden in plain sight mental health issues that arise within the book. So, like me, you've probably seen this movie as a kid. And by movie as a kid, I was born in the 90s, so I mean the Disney cartoon. But there's the live action one now too, which again I'm sure you've seen. Going into the book, the only thing I could really remember about the movie was
I'm late for a very important date.
a very friendly looking cat, a smoking caterpillar,
My lungs are blackened.
and a chase scene that kind of scared me when I was a child. Now, it should be noted that the cartoon has certainly done a great job at adapting the book, but I suppose that shouldn't be a surprise as it's fairly small and Disney was on top of its game back then. But we're here to talk about the book, so let me quickly do a recap and give you my thoughts. And as we go along, you too, like me, may begin to think you're going mad. Alice starts by chilling out on the riverbank with her sister, reading a book, when her mind begins to wander as she sees a rabbit. She eventually falls down the rabbit hole, and this is where we as the reader begin to descend into madness ourselves. She hits the bottom, curiously drinks something marked "Drink Me," even though she knows herself it could be poison, but YOLO. She grows small, then through consuming more random stuff lying about, she grows too tall, begins to cry, and then shrinks again, nearly drowning in a sea of her own tears. She offends a bunch of animals, talking about how she normally eats them. She gets stuck in the rabbit's house before shrinking again, meets a stoner caterpillar who helps her get to normal height. Then she runs into a lassie called the Duchess, who's rather mean and has a big baby that Alice steals, and then loses. Rip. She meets the big cheery Cheshire cat, crashes the Mad Hatter tea party, then comes across the Queen and a group of folk playing a game of croquet, and this is where things start to get mental. I mean, they were mental before, but after the Queen tries to kill everyone for the slightest thing, she is then sent to meet the Griffin, who takes her to the Mock Turtle. And I swear this is where the author was on shrooms or asked a child to tell him a story and straight up plagiarised it, because I was reading this and it made no sense to me. Specifically, it was to do more with the lobster quadrille, a dance essentially. Okay, so I was gonna read it to you.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Aye, that's what I thought. The actual part in the book might not be that bad after all. I could have just been tired when I was reading it, but after it I definitely thought, eh? Anyway, we get to the final act. Alice is at a court case where some dude's about to get yeeted for stealing some tarts, and we get to see some familiar faces from the book make a comeback. Alice is the last witness, and at this point she's nearly her normal height again. She decides she's had enough of all this madness and wakes up just as the cards attack her, and basically, that's the book. I never actually read this book as a child, so I don't know what I was expecting considering it's 150 years old and it's for kids. But if you haven't read it yet, I suggest you do. It's definitely unique. You have to admire Alice, this young lass. We aren't exactly told how young, but she doesn't exactly play it safe. She's strong, a lot stronger than I was at her age. You can see her trying to navigate this strange world, making mistakes along the way but learning from them. It wasn't uncommon for children's books to have dangers in them back then. In fact, Alice herself talks about how kids don't remember lessons from such books and end up getting burnt or eaten by beasts. I don't have any kids, but surely telling them that the world can be dangerous and at times a very confusing place isn't a bad thing. I know I was certainly freaked out by a few kids' movies back then. They still scare me. And I'm sure they didn't do me any harm. Yes, they did. Alice is definitely headstrong, and I know she's fictional, although based on a real girl that C.S. Lewis knew, and there's a whole backstory behind that potentially strange relationship, but that's not for now. Anyway, she straight up steals a baby and is quick to save guards. She stands up for herself. She embraces the madness, not letting it faze her.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Although it is unlikely that Carroll intended to create a story on mental health disorders, one is certainly able to see them in nearly all his characters. On first reading, it does feel like there's more here than just a children's story. Sadly, Carroll himself said that there is no hidden meaning within the book, but that's no fun, so let's just conveniently ignore that part and instead cherry pick some information that he apparently had a fascination with mental derangement, because that lends nicely to our theory. There is some convincing examples that come up. One, that Alice has a lack of control in eating and drinking random things within the story is linked to an actual eating disorder. It doesn't take much to persuade her to drink the first thing she sees, just a label saying "drink me," as if the bottled liquid itself is enticing her. It's the same with the cake. eat me. Although she remarks that neither say poison, so I suppose she gets some credit at least. I mean, she hesitated, but once she's had a little sip or a nibble, she just gulps the rest down, and then she either becomes too big or too small, and then regrets the whole thing later, like me after I've eaten a whole tub of Ben & Jerry's. Could the White Rabbit represent obsessive-compulsive disorder, mixed with a happy dose of anxiety and paranoia regarding the time? He's obsessed with it, and very worried about the consequences of missing anything. But I suppose, in a world where everyone's head's about to be chopped off, I probably would be a paranoid mess as well. Now, the Mad Hatter is one that is probably one of the more well-known characters, thanks in part to Johnny Depp's portrayal. And if we're looking for links to mental health, Depp's version is definitely more obvious than in the book. Still, both the Hatter and the March Hare could have some form of personality disorder. To be fair, all the animals have been talking in the book so far, and their dialogue is often bizarre. But I feel this is the first time it's so stark, and then obviously it gets worse at that lobster quadrille I was talking about earlier. But as for the Hatter, his mood is all over the place and he can barely sit still. This is where Alice's compassion shines through, and perhaps a message to everyone to be a little kinder to people. The Mad Hatter asks Alice, "Have I gone mad?" "I'm afraid so," said Alice. "You're entirely bonkers, but I'll tell you a secret. All the best people are." Obviously, the Queen is a narcissistic psycho, threatening everyone and wanting her own way, and the Duchess isn't much better. There's definitely some more, and if you want to add them down to the comments after you've read the book, because if you haven't read it yet, then I'm sure you will, then comment away. I just want to add before we finish that if the acceptance of mental health can be normalised at a young age, in that someone is not quote-unquote mad just because they are different, and perhaps exploring these issues openly as early as possible, we can prevent these things getting out of hand before things escalate to the point of causing harm. It's been 150 years since this book was written, and it's only been in recent years that mental health has been talked about more and more, and it should be talked about, because surely it's only through dialogue that we can help those who need it. For in truth, we all know, even if it's just a little, that we're all mad down here. If you've made it to the end of the video, I applaud you. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. I'll be doing a mixture of these types of videos after books I've read, and I'll also be continuing my Buddhist journey. Please let me know your thoughts, and as always, let's talk.